Well,
thank you, Scott. My pleasure to open the Harwich Board of Selectmen's meeting for April 16, 2020. At this time, I'll take a roll call of the Board of Selectmen, so we sure we're all here. Michael?
Here.
Steve?
Here.
Ed?
Here.
Don?
Here.
So our meeting is called to order, and Joe, I think as you mentioned before, we will call the Board of Assessors meeting when they have we have another one join us. Maybe that's Richard, but we'll see where we go from here.
Right, I would recommend, Mr. Chairman, when we get to new business item B, you can then have the other bodies called to order.
Will do. New business item A is a pleasure for us. We, of course, the unpleasant part of that was a tornado last summer, and we had hoped to get some relief from the state, and it came through a couple of days ago. So what I'd like to do now is turn this discussion over to Carol Capola, because she was instrumental in this. Joe, you played a role. And we're joined by Representative Sarah Peak, and we played a critical role in this. And Pat Johnson, I gather you're here for State Senator Julian Sears. So thank you very much for joining. And I would, Sarah says, Joe, you want to start with you?
Sarah says that Julian is on too.
Julian's on too. Well, hello, Julian. No pictures, so I'll take your word for it. Carol, you want to give us some background on this?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see all of you. My little screen here. So today we're bringing before the Board of Selectmen the authorization to accept the funds so graciously provided by the Commonwealth in the amount of let me pull it up, I'm sorry. Oh, gosh, I apologize. $1,171,060, and that is for the extraordinary relief for the tornado that touched down in Harwich on July 23rd, 2019. As you are aware, the town experienced extensive damage to the community, as well as the residents to their home. And this funding, it helps to support all of the expenses that the town incurred. And actually the town will incur expenses moving forward as well. So I would urge the Board of Selectmen to consider accepting these funds from the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Carol.
Larry, can I make a motion?
Pardon?
Can I make a motion to accept?
You may.
Yes, with our gratitude, I'd like to move that we accept the $1,171,060.
I'll second that.
And Don, part of the motion needs to be to authorize me to sign the document.
And authorize the chair to sign.
I'll still second that.
You still okay, Don? Ed? Michael? Okay.
Michael.
The motion in a second. Let me throw it into discussion right now and ask for comments, but I would like to start with Sarah. Could you please comment on this? This didn't come at a better time. I thought the tornado would be our low point during the year, but we managed to get lower.
Yeah, Larry, did you call on me? I was unmuting myself, so I lost the audio there for a second. Oh, great. Well, thank you for inviting the senator and me to join you this evening. Crazy times that we're going through now, but I remember that day that the Speaker and Senator Markey and Congressman Keating all came down, and we had the meeting in your meeting room where you're not even permitted to meet now. And I see Chief Clark there. You drove us around to the various sites. And I think, there's nothing like being boots on the ground, seeing the damage, hearing from the stakeholders in the community, and we're to really understand what needs to be done and the amount of damage that occurred. And, this is money that, yes, Julian and I put our shoulder to the wheel, and we worked to get it in a supplemental budget that got hung up, it seemed like forever in conference committee, and then finally got released. But it was really all of you in Harwich who made the case. And, it's not just your community, but the surrounding communities that were affected by the tornadoes who are receiving funding as well, although the lion's share, because unfortunately the lion's share of damage happened in Harwich, is coming to the community. And I'm just relieved that the paperwork is going through and you're going to be able to get this money because, we're seeing unprecedented times where there's going to be great stress on the state budget. And after your last meeting, when the board reached out to me, we contacted administration and finance, found out what the delay was. We got the paperwork moving. And when I got an email or text exchange, I think with your chairman, I said, sign those papers and get them back to Boston as soon as possible so that you get the check in the bank. And that will be truly a happy day to celebrate. And I think I can speak for the senator in saying we're just glad that we could be there for you and help to make this happen. This was truly a team effort of local and state government working together. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this happening as we come out of the COVID-19 crisis. And this certainly lays the groundwork for more good stuff ahead.
Thank you, Sarah. Julian or Pat, do you wish to comment?
Mr. Chairman, I thought Julian was on, or I thought Senator Sear was on, but if he had any technical difficulties, I think Representative Peake spoke very well for him.
You know what? Hey,
Oh, there you are. Here he is.
I made the I made the cardinal sin of not pressing *6. Anyway, I'll be brief. I share Sarah's relief that the check is nearly in hand. We are going into we're already in tough times, and we're likely going to be in tougher times financially. From a state perspective, we're expecting a revenue shortfall in FY21 that's going to be between $4.7 and $6 billion. So I'm glad that we've got nearly the check in hand, and just really want to, especially thank Sarah's staff and my staff who are very dogged in chasing this down and making sure we got some attention on it. I think that hopefully this is a model for the kind of support we can get and we can bring home to Harwich and the rest of Cape Cod and the islands. From the state and hopefully from the federal level, we're going to need the feds to really step in and to help us get back on our feet from the current pandemic. So I know you folks are juggling a lot. I really appreciate the level of communication you've been putting out there. Sarah and I and our teams are working really, really hard to respond and to help whoever needs it. Please encourage residents of the town who are listening. If you need help, reach out to me, reach out to Representative Peake. If you go to senatorsear.com, that's senatorcyr.com, we've got a whole list of every issue you can imagine related to COVID-19. And if you check out Sarah's Facebook page and mine as well, there's some good information there. So this is a bright moment in an otherwise pretty sober and difficult time, and just glad we could be with you. It's so easy when we just do this remotely. We can rely on this in the future, because I think this is a really good way for us to communicate and chime in difficult times, and maybe we can keep it up in this fashion when things get a little better. So thank you for inviting both of us to join you.
You're welcome, Julian. I just noticed, I'm showing my age, JC, it just pops in my mind, Jesus Christ Superstar, but I'll let that.
I was in Jesus Christ Superstar in my senior year of high school at Knoxville. I played Pontius Pilate.
Oh boy, don't admit to that.
Okay. Maybe before we move on, let me just ask Chief Clark and Joe who were involved because, now we're going back memory lane, at least for a couple months. Of course, tornado was bad, but the cooperation we had with everyone and the town staff was just incredible. So maybe just a short remembrance of what we went through, and we all know the negative and the positive side. Chief, I'll turn it over to you first.
Well, I'll start with being home at noontime and watching Cindy Fitzgibbons with the weather radar, and when she said she wasn't kidding that the people in Harwich and Chatham need to take cover. So I go into cold sweats at noontime every time I turn her on and watch her on the weather. I want to say that day was something that I never expected as the fire chief here on Cape Cod. But I will say I reached out to Sarah that day with a description of what was going on, and shortly thereafter Julian, and they provided every single bit of help we needed. The little town of Harwich was a priority for them, and that was it meant a lot to me because we had a lot of people to take care of, a lot of people we couldn't get to. So I can't thank Sarah and Julian enough for the continued support. And that support is the same on days when it's just routine business, if you want to call it that. But that day I will remember forever for many reasons, but I will always remember the help that they gave us. And I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, Norm. Joe, I know you're intimately involved with that day.
Well, my quick story on that is I had only been on the job as assistant town administrator 2 months to the day. So it was my crash course on meeting a lot of the colleagues that I've now worked with day in and day out. And as Chief said, once we got over the shock of the damage and realized that as incredible and extensive as the damage was, the remarkable fact that no fatalities and no major injuries is absolutely remarkable for any of us that saw the immediate aftermath. But Mr. Chairman, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the process that led to our superb legislative delegation coming to this point. And it's also not lost on me. I'm sitting in the EOC tonight for a completely different reason and spent some time back in the EOC back during tornado. But the dollar amount that we got, that we're getting through the amazing efforts of Senator Sear and Representative Peake is truly that. It's amazing because as assistant town administrator back in August, I was tasked with trying to catalog all of the expenses that the town incurred in response to the tornado. And it was an exercise that was conducted through MEMA and all of their requirements. Our submittal on August 8th of 2019 was in excess of $1.25 million in expenses. And I bring that up because we had been told by MEMA that if there was going to be a reimbursement, and again, the emphasis was if they were going to be able to reimburse, we shouldn't expect anywhere close to 75%. And through the efforts of Representative Peake and Senator Sear, and doing it as a supplemental budget, we're now receiving 94% of what we anticipated on August 8th. A remarkable number, far greater than anything we ever could have anticipated had it not gone through the legislative process. So I really want that to be underscored as well, that our legislative delegation truly brought money back to Harwich, and incredibly grateful for their efforts.
Well, Joe, I know.
Let me just ask quickly on my fellow selectmen if they wish to comment. I'll start with you, Michael.
I think I'd just like to mimic the statements from previous speakers, but thank Sarah Peake and Julian Sear for all of their help, as well as our incredible town staff. I think I would be remiss if I didn't point out Christopher Clark, the past town administrator. He played a big role in this, and I think he did an excellent job leading at that time. So thank you, Chris, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, again, Team Peake and Team Sear, the rep and the senator did an amazing job, and their staff, I'm sure, did a lot of work knowing them. and our own people. Norm for everything he did. My memory of that time was Joe going out and counting tree stumps to be able to come up with these underlying numbers. So, as Michael said, there's a lot of people in town that deserve credit. Carol's name hasn't come up yet, so I'm going to bring that up. She set up the forums and the paperwork so we can get this back in. And she was integrally involved with this, and so was Joe. So thanks, everybody. I'm glad everybody has our collective backs.
Thank you, Don. Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo the previous speakers. I mean, once again, Representative Peake and Senator Sear have shown that how responsive they are to the concerns and needs of their districts. They're always there for us, and we're going through another tough time, and I'd like to hear those reassurances that they gave us already on the phone tonight about what we're dealing with beyond this. But thanks again for what you've done in regard to this.
Thank you. Ed?
I'll just mimic what everyone else has said. We all know that I think, for a small town, has the best legislative delegation in the state, in Julian and Sarah, and thank you.
Any other discussion, comments? We have a motion and a second. I'll go through a roll call vote. Ed?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so that's unanimous, easy vote. And I promise, Sarah, I will I'll be in the office tomorrow morning to sign the paperwork.
That's beautiful. And thank you all for inviting the senator and me to join you this evening. And please know, through this COVID-19 time or any time after that, you can count on the senator, you can count on me. I'm looking at Chief Clark. Sometime I'm just waiting to see your name come up on my cell phone, and you're just calling to invite me for a beer instead of
Right.
instead of it being a tornado or needing PPEs or something like that. But wouldn't that be fun?
That would be great. I just
great.
wanted to mention that before you leave, for everybody watching and listening, that day one, I reached out to Sarah, and we have talked several times, and she has provided us everything that we need to deal with this pandemic. It's a very serious situation, and she has been right there for us from literally day one. And I can't thank her and Julian to make sure that the first responders on Cape Cod are safe. And we are, and thank you very much. It's not that way everywhere in the state, but we're in a good spot. We have good help. Thank you.
Yeah, and I have to give a shout out not only to Senator Sear, but to the rest of the legislative delegation. We are working arm in arm and side by side with each other, whether it's Rep. Fernandez or Vieira from Falmouth, and of course Tim Whalen, who lives just over the line in Brewster, all of us together. We meet weekly in an all delegation Zoom meeting and go through the critical issues and sort of divide up who's going to take on what, and are just staying fully engaged with our communities, but also speaking with one unified voice across political lines, across House and Senate lines, to the executive branch and to our respective leaderships in the House and Senate, in order to ensure that we're getting our fair share down here and that our folks are going to be taken care of. So, it's a real honor to serve with my colleagues from the Cape in the legislative delegation, and we all love this place, so it's an easy thing to do.
Well said,
Thanks again, Sarah. And Julian, thanks for both of you watching our meeting. Now you can still, of course, stay online and hear the rest of more too.
Yeah, well, I love municipal government, but I've got dinner in the oven, so I think I'm going to go take care of that instead. But thank you.
Okay.
All righty. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Then we move on next to item B. And thank you, Richard, for the, I've lost your, I don't know, we went to, there you go. You moved on me. Could you call your board together? So we have a quorum now. So if you could do that, we will start the item B.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could just ask for the other chairmen that are present, we just ask that you do your any of your actions, excuse me, any of your actions by roll call. So if you could do your call to order and identify the members, and we would have first the Board of Assessors and then the Board of Water Commissioners to be called to order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Powers, Richard Waystack, Chair of the Harwich Board of Assessors. Present is Mr. Jay Kavanaugh. Jay, could you unmute and tell us you are present?
I am present.
Mr. Bruce Nightingale? Mr. Nightingale must not be present, but the two of us do constitute a quorum of our board, so we are present.
Thank you, Richard. Let's see, Gary, are you the, you want to handle the water commissioners?
I am not the chair. Mr. Thompson is the chair, but I
okay.
am.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Alan? Not sure Alan can hear me.
You may need to tell them about the joys of star 6.
Yeah, star 6.
There you go.
Sorry. Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello? Oh,
We can hear you.
For the water commissioner, we have a roll call. Gary?
Here.
Judith? Sounds like
Yeah, Alan, push star 6 so we can hear you. There you go.
I did. You hear me all right? Huh?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Judith? Hello, Judith?
Star 6 also.
Larry? Hello?
Can you hear me now? Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, yes.
All right.
Judith here.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. So we have a quorum, a full quorum. Larry?
So, Scott, can you see? It looks like Larry's screen is frozen.
Okay. We have a quorum, all three commissioners.
It does look like it's frozen.
All right. So thank you to the chairs of the Board of Assessors and the Board of Water Commissioners. I'm not sure if Larry was able to return. Looks like his video may have been interrupted.
Okay.
At this point then, Ed, as Vice Chair, would you want to recognize our Finance Director for her presentation of the subject matter?
Yes, Carol, would you make the presentation?
Sure, thank you very much. As the board is aware, the Act to address challenges faced by municipalities and state authorities resulting from COVID-19, Chapter 53 of the Acts of 2020, allows for Sections 10 and 11 to be locally adopted by the Board of Selectmen. I would ask that the board consider adopting these, and I'd like to read them for you. Because
Okay,
what is very...
Somehow I lost my audio. Sorry about that.
So Larry, just to bring you up to speed, we have quorums of Board of Assessors, Board of Water Commissioners. Ed stepped in your video absence, and Carol's presenting the agenda topic.
I would ask that the board consider adopting Section 10 and 11 of the acts in order to provide some relief to your taxpayers and your residents in the community. It's essential that that the board, if you choose to adopt these, that you adopt them by, and I will read them for you, but you have to adopt each one individually. So you can adopt them with one vote. However, we need to make it perfectly clear to the public in your minutes that you are adopting each item here. And so these provisions provide for the extension of real estate and personal property tax payment deadlines from May 1st, 2020 to June 1st, 2020. They also could extend the date bills for taxes assessed for omitted property or incorrectly valued property to be mailed from May 1st instead of May 1st to June 1st. They extend the date of application for exemption of taxes due from April 1st, 2020 to June 1st, 2020. And by the extension of this exemption of taxes, deferrals are automatically extended as well. To waive the payment and interest and other penalties in the event of a late payment for any excise, tax, betterment assessment or apportionment, water rate user fees, or other charges added to tax for any payments with due dates on or after March 10th, 2020. This waiver of interest and penalties is granted if payment is made after its due date, but before June 30th, 2020. And also that no essential services may be terminated by the town of Harwich due to a resident's failure to pay these taxes or fees if non-payment resulted from a demonstrated inability to pay due to the COVID-19 outbreak or the governor's declaration of a state of emergency. This inability to pay shall include demonstrated financial hardship of a resident due to evidence such as loss of employment or serious illness or death of someone within the home. And further, that the Board of Selectmen hereby authorize the Water Department to defer the due date of the third quarter water bills to June 15th, 2020, allowing then for a 15-day grace period to June 30th, 2020. And finally, if these local options are exercised, the town is required to notify residents and taxpayers through any and all of the following mechanisms: by posting a notice on the town's website, through social media outlets, and or a reverse 911 notification.
Thank you, Carol. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
No. Sorry, for some reason I lost part of my connection here.
Larry,
do
if
you want
I
a
may,
motion?
this is Joe. I just want to put out there for the record that also joining this evening, if the boards have any questions, we have the treasurer collector, Amy Bullock. We have our wastewater superintendent, Dan Pelletier, and we have our assessing director, Donna Molino, on the call as well. So we do have staff available to answer questions if any of the three boards are seeking guidance.
Larry, do you want a motion?
I do. Would you, Steve? I'll entertain a motion.
I move to accept sections 10 and 11 of the Act as described by Carol Coppola.
Don, second.
Any discussion?
Yeah.
Larry, can we hear from each of the departments to make sure about what the impact is to them?
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, Richard Wastewater.
Yeah, Richard.
In terms of the exemptions and deferrals, it can only benefit our most vulnerable residents of the community. Our staff are geared up to handle any additional changes that come in, but we feel consensus of our board that it's the right thing to do for the residents of this community.
Does that respond to your question, Don?
Yeah, I just wanted them to have the opportunity. They're on the call, so I wanted to hear from their perspective about, whether they were supporting it or not.
Thank you.
Larry?
Yes.
Larry? Yeah, well, the water commissioners haven't voted it. We're hearing it now. Without a doubt in my mind, I know they would be supporting it also. We need to do a motion and a roll call vote to adopt this.
Do you want to call in the other members to see if for their comments?
Yes, we could do that. Yes, by all means. Judith and Gary, yeah?
Yeah, I'm in agreement.
Larry, this is Joe. If I can just offer to Chairman Thompson that it may be an appropriate motion through the Board of Water Commissioners relative to the provision that Carol have read, which states the Board of Selectmen hereby authorize the Water Department to defer the due date of the third quarter water bills to June 15th, 2020, allowing for a 15-day grace period to June 30, 2020. So it may be helpful for the Board of Selectmen to have the Board of Water Commissioners make a motion relative to that specific provision.
Yes, that's what I'd like to do. Yes.
Can you do that now, Alan? And we'll do that first, and we'll go back to the Board of Assessors.
Okay.
Folks, before you do that, I'm sorry, it's Carol Capola. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I just don't know if the water department has any outstanding bills that were due on or after March 10th. And if they do, then this would waive the payment of interest or any other penalties if the section 10, or that's actually section 11. If section 11 were adopted as well. All right.
If I may, Mr. Valentine?
Dan, are you on?
Yeah, how you doing? So we are currently awaiting the completion of this meeting to issue our next bill. So right now, the last bill was Q2. So
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry, it's Carol again. I just don't know if there's any other invoices that the water department would have sent out that have interest or penalties that would be associated if those invoices, and it's not just for user fees, were due on or after March 10th.
So Carol, what's your suggestion? That can they move this with a condition on those invoices?
Correct.
Move ahead tonight?
Correct.
Alan, can you do that so we can move ahead?
All right. Okay. Let me ask you this: on the bills that from prior, in the March bills, they will also be exempt from the surcharges.
Larry, if I may, the first item that I mentioned is specific to the water bills. The second item that Carol has raised is provision number 4 under the materials that Carol provided. It may be appropriate for the water commissioners to first speak of their fourth quarter water bills and then to speak to provision 4 to just clarify the discussion.
Okay. Well, Gary, did you wish to comment? Or Alan?
Yeah. Go ahead, Larry. Go ahead, Alan.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Alan. We can hear you.
Okay. All right. First thing to do is the third quarter water bills would be the next bills out. So I would entertain a motion from my fellow commissioners to support this extension to June the 15th and then the grace period to June the 30th.
I'll make a motion to approve that, but I believe it's the fourth quarter bills, not the third quarter.
Oh, okay. I stand corrected. Okay, fourth quarter bills. All right, Gary?
I'll second that.
Quick question for everybody. The agenda materials in the packet make reference to third quarter bill. Dan, can you speak to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, our bills were supposed to go out within the last week. We delayed them for this, which would be for our third quarter. The fourth quarter would end on June 30th, so they are the third quarter bills.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Okay, all right. All right, so I have a
I'll make a motion for the third quarter bill.
Okay. Judith seconded? Yes?
Yes, second.
Okay. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to approve the extension of payment time from June the 15th and a grace period to June the 30th for the third quarter water bills. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Aye, Alan, can you do my roll count?
Okay. Gary?
Aye.
Judith?
Aye.
Alan is aye. Unanimous vote.
Thank you. Then we would ask the Board of Water Commissioners to turn your attention to provision number 4, as articulated by our finance director, that may impact upon any other late payments, water rate user fees, or any other charges related to the water department.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion to extend. What is the terminology for that?
I can help you. I can help you.
Okay. Okay.
To waive the payment. To waive the payment of interest and or other penalties in the event of a late payment for any water bills, for any services that had a due date on or after March 10th, 2020, and the waiver of interest and penalties are granted if payment is made after its due date, but before June 30th.
So moved. I'll make a motion.
All right, Gary. All right.
And I'll second that.
All right. And a roll call vote. Gary?
Aye.
Judith?
Aye.
And Alan? Aye. A unanimous vote.
Thank you, Al. And Joe, I presume we now move to the Board of Assessors.
Correct. And I would just ask our finance director if she would identify any specific items that the Board of Assessors should make motions on.
I don't believe the Board of Assessors need to make any motions at all with regard to Section 10 or 11, and that I believe this is a vote by the Board of Selectmen.
So then I will ask if there's one of my fellow selectmen wish to move on this.
Already have.
We already have a motion and a second.
Okay, you lost me for a couple minutes there while I got disconnected. If there's any other discussion?
Larry?
Yes, Michael.
If I heard Carol correctly, she wanted us to take these up individually. Are we okay with the blanket motion?
Carol?
I believe you are, as long as I believe that you accepted the motion, accepted them as read individually. So I believe you are all set.
You okay with that, Michael?
Yes.
We have a motion and a second. I'll take a roll call then. Michael, I'll start with you since we just talked.
Aye.
Ed? Ed, you're still muted if you're trying to say something. Star 6.
Yes.
Steve?
Yes. Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So that's unanimous. Carol, is there anything more we need to do or Richard or Alan on this, or have we handled it?
Thank you very much. We're all set.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, just want to thank the other boards that were present. It would be appropriate for their chairs to call for adjournment of their boards. And then beyond that, I would just let everybody know that we will work with staff as identified in the motion to broadly announce these decisions for the relief and benefit of the residents and taxpayers of the town.
Mr. Chairman, I call the motion, Mr. Kavanaugh, to adjourn the Board of Assessors meeting. Mr. Kavanaugh?
I didn't hear you.
I entertain a motion to adjourn the Board of Assessors meeting.
I would second that.
No, you need to move it.
Sorry. I will move it.
Chair will second. Mr. Kavanaugh?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
Thank you very much. It's not easy doing this. Alan, you want to handle your board?
Yes, I entertain a motion to adjourn the Water Commissioners meeting.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
We need a roll
Aye.
call on it. We need a roll call.
Oh, okay. Gary?
Aye.
Judith?
Aye.
Alan? Aye. Unanimous vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Gary.
Stay safe.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Move on to old business then. And it's COVID-19 updates. And Joe, I presume we move directly to Megan, or you want to say something first?
Well, in this instance, what I'd like to speak about is first one thing that is not necessarily health or policy, but then update the board and the general public on the decisions that we've come to on the operational capacity as we are now in the midst of the surge of the coronavirus, COVID-19 in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And the first part, Mr. Chairman, is really just is me speaking as a not just a town employee for the town of Harwich or as a resident, but just as a fellow human being. Megan and I talked about this today with the department heads. I know that the health department and our staff is being inundated. And that is merely to just say that we're asking everybody to wear a mask when you go out in general public. And when you wear a mask, that is an action that you're taking to benefit your fellow human beings. And if we all do that, we're all taking care of each other. But we really need people to start ramping up the use of masks as they go out into the general public. So if you're heading to the grocery store, the gas station, the dump, or whatever it may be, and you think that you may inadvertently come into contact with somebody else, please do the right thing and wear a mask. It is shown to be the quickest way for us to reduce transmission and to really power through not only the surge, but going forward beyond that. And I say that because Megan will be able to speak to the fact that her office is inundated with complaint calls and requests for enforcement. And while we could go through the exercise through the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Health and mandating that every man, woman, and child in the town don a mask under certain circumstances, it is impossible for us to enforce that. So we are pleading to the better angels of people to ask everyone that if you're going out in the general public, whether you think you'll be in contact with somebody or not, please do the right thing and wear a mask. That concludes my public service announcement part of it, Mr. Chairman. What I'd like to do before turning it over to Megan for a more in-depth public health discussion, I do want to rely upon my notes here at the EOC, but just advise the board and through the board to the general public, we will be releasing guidance document number 11, Friday, April 17th, aiming for the morning. And that will be an update on last week's notice on operational capacity. Governor Baker has confirmed today that the numbers that the Department of Public Health are seeing indicate that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is in the midst of a surge of cases and in a surge of hospitalizations and unfortunately a surge in the number of fatalities related to COVID-19. In light of that, we've made some subtle but important changes to our operational capacity. And they both relate to services that are deemed essential by the governor so that we have a legal and moral obligation to provide those. So effective on April 20th, the transfer station will expand operations while still affording traffic schematics to enforce social distancing. And again, anybody seeking to go to the transfer station, we urge them to wear a mask while they're there. We will be putting back online the transfer station operations related to yard waste, construction and debris, and other materials on that end of the transfer station, including compost and manure. Again, efforts are being placed for that to be back online on Monday, April 20th. Additionally, we are working with our inspectional departments to ensure that remote inspectional services related to, again, based on the governor's order, what is deemed to be essential construction services. And so that relates to housing and things of that nature. So we will be, the town of Harwich will be resuming operational inspections of construction projects that have been deemed essential. And we will do these in accordance with the requirements, but also ensuring that staff take all necessary safety and health precaution measures. Again, we will be rolling that out as guidance document number 11 to be released on April 17th. The transfer station changes to go into effect on April 20th. The inspectional services changes to go into effect April 21st. And as we did this week, we will do another check-in to see where we are in regards to the surge, with the fervent hope that we're seeing the end of the surge sometime next week. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll now turn it over to our Public Health Director for a specific health update and other discussions. Megan, all yours.
Thanks, Joe. A word on the mask discussion. Yes, we have been getting quite a few phone calls, emails, requests from people wanting the Board of Health to require masks on everybody. And like Joe said, it's a great thing to think of, but we can't force it at this point, and we can recommend it, and it is a good way to protect those around you. Like I've said before, COVID-19, you can have it and not know it. So if you're out in the grocery store and you don't think you're sick, don't know you're sick, and you're not wearing a mask, you're spreading those germs onto the objects around you. Even if you're 6 feet away from other people, you could be breathing on the produce or something like that. So wearing the mask will prevent your germs from getting onto other objects. A note about masks, I've said it before, don't take the N95 masks away from our first responders. Those are made for healthcare workers, and they're specifically designed for the healthcare setting. Use the cloth masks, use the ones that are homemade. That's a great use for it. They're washable. You can bring it home and wash it. Masks, you can reuse your homemade mask throughout the day and then wash it at night. Just in soap and water will disinfect it. So that's a good thing. And all the time I see people looking to donate these homemade masks, and they're in fun colors, and hopefully people will want to wear them. They're not meant for kids under the age of 2, just as a FYI. Kids can wear them if they're under the age of 2. It could restrict their breathing, so don't put this on a baby. That's just something I definitely need to get out there. I don't want everybody putting these on babies. On to other health department complaints, concerns. We also had a few people calling and emailing saying that we should require gloves, disposable gloves on the general public and everyone in supermarkets and the workforce. And again, gloves protect you and can easily transmit germs because you think your hands are protected. You are touching everything, and then your gloves are dirty, and then you get in your car with your gloves on, and your steering wheel now has the germs on it. So gloves, you should really only be wearing the gloves if you're a healthcare worker or you're using them to protect yourself from cleaning products. When you're doing your deep cleans and you don't want to have your bare skin touching the chemicals, that's a good time to put your gloves on. Gloves, you have to know how to take them on and put them off in order to not contaminate yourself during the use. So gloves, not the best idea for people to be wearing when they're out in the grocery store, especially since people don't understand that you can't touch anything when you're wearing gloves except what you think is contaminated. You can't touch the contaminated items and then pull your phone out or your car keys or touch the door handle. It's counterproductive. So moving on to case counts and case numbers. I did give you guys some information in your packet that shows Harwich curve in comparison to Barnstable County and the state. We have 29 cases of positives in Harwich. Good news is we have not had a new positive case since the 9th. So about a week now, we've gone without a new positive case, which is wonderful. And the new positive case that we did get is a household contact of a previous positive. So again, that's really good news. It means we're doing something right. It doesn't mean we can relax our measures. It doesn't mean that we are free to go back to our old ways. It just means that we're doing something right. Social distancing, hand washing, staying away from places that are really populated. It's making an impact. The state, however, isn't doing quite as well as Harwich and Cape Cod. The state has gone up over 2,200 new cases in the last 24 hours. So the total case count in Massachusetts is 32,181. And like Joe was saying, our surge is really shown in the new fatalities. We're at a fatality rate, I believe, of 3.7 or 3.9, which is very high for an infectious disease. State total deaths right now is at 1,245. That's up by 137 since yesterday. So we're seeing more numbers, but also more fatalities and more hospitalizations. Cape Cod Hospital right now is reporting that they have 20 COVID cases on the floors and 8 COVID cases in the ICU. So that's an increase from last week as well. So even though our numbers in Harwich are looking pretty good, the cases in Barnstable County went up to 550, but the deaths have stayed pretty level, 18 deaths. I think that's just one more death since Sunday. So the surge, I don't want to give people false hope that we're in the surge and we'll be out of it in a week, because I think Cape Cod is a week or two behind the rest of the state, just like we saw with the very beginning of the spread of this disease. Boston started with the high numbers, and it was a week or two later before Cape Cod numbers caught up. So we'll either remain as we are for another week or two and finally see the flattening and the decline, or in a week or two, we'll see that bigger number again, just because for some reason we're just a little bit behind. So there's really no way to tell right now if Cape Cod surge is at the same time as the rest of the state. I think we'll have to take this week by week. But again, change anything we're doing right now because it seems to be working. Case numbers, Cape Cod Healthcare has started a heat map. I talked to you about it last week, and Harwich was on there all along. It just was lumped in with Chatham and other Lower Cape because they couldn't just do it by town. They had to do it by zip code, and Chatham and Harwich had asked not to get to that level. Specifically, Chatham has a lot fewer cases, so giving it down to the zip code could really send some poor messages and not protect the privacy of the individuals. But now that Harwich's cases are up in pretty consistent numbers with the rest of the Mid and Upper Cape, I did ask them to go ahead and put us on the zip code level. But I want people to know that most of the cases are listed as 02645, even if their address, their mailing address, even if their physical address is outside of 02645. So take the zip code numbers with a grain of salt. They they aren't completely accurate with where the patient lives, which is true across the board. A patient could live in one place, but have family that isn't isolated, and they could just be in quarantine that are using grocery stores or gas stations. So it's really important to maintain social distancing and staying at home as much as you can in order to slow or stop the spread. So don't let our guard down, and I think we'll get out of this safely. Department of Public Health has also announced that because every state in the Commonwealth has at least one case, that they are comfortable now releasing town by town data, which is a little irritating because they had told us not to do that in the beginning, and now it suits them. So that's what we're doing. So they are going to release that on Wednesdays. So Wednesdays, I will just upload their data onto our website, and so far it's accurate. 29 cases showing on theirs, 29 cases on mine. The Department of Public Health also on their website has a list of all the hospitals in the state and what their bed capacity is, what their bed occupancy is, ICU. It's interesting data. I'm not sure unless you're into data, if anybody wants to look at that, but it's interesting, and they're doing a lot of statistics, and they say the more testing that we do, the more we know where the cases and hotspots are, the better we can control it. So that's my spiel tonight, and I'm happy to take some questions.
So, have questions or comments for Megan or for Joe? Seems like you've answered people's questions, Amy and Joe. Thank you again very much. I haven't been in the middle of discussions, obviously, but I've seen enough emails to know how hard you're working on not only the safety, but trying to accommodate some of the needs that we have for our residents. The dump has been, the landfill has been a big question, how we can move ahead on that. We have others that will come up again. I'm sure beaches will come up some more. I'm told that golf is a social and psychic, mental, credible, essential service. So that's going to keep coming to us if we get nicer weather. But thanks to you all for working so hard to try to walk the balance and keeping us safe and allowing us to do what we can.
Sure, and the Board of Health is meeting on Tuesday night virtually. It will be a live meeting, 6:30 Tuesday. So if you want to tune in for to hear the Board of Health's discussion, we'll be talking about it as well.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. No other comments?
Larry?
Then? Pardon? Michael?
Larry, could I ask a question? It's not of Megan. Megan, thank you. Thank you for the update. I really appreciate it. Joe, on the dump and reopening the back part of the dump, is there a plan in place from the DPW director to use highway staff? Or can we, or should we expect overtime based on the way that they're doing the other part of the dump?
No, we're not expecting overtime, and he has assured me that he has enough staff to redirect, that we will have ample coverage there as regular rate.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll move into item B under old business, and I'll turn this over to Norm Clark, to Chief Clark, to talk about the town administrator's search
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any additional comments under TA's report. So if the board has no objection, I'd like to bow out at this time.
Yes, please. Sorry, I forgot.
Oh, thanks, everybody.
We'll see you back in a bit.
Ready for me?
I'm ready for you.
All right, good evening, board. We did meet last night remotely, and that seems to be going pretty well. And we really didn't move on to any new topics. It just comes down to the fact that I'll just give you our bullet points right now. It's just keeping the desire to expedite the process, but to make it an open process. The town has a charter, and we all are in agreement that the recommendation would be to stick to the confines of the charter. But I think you can make that a win-win, if you will, to make sure that folks don't think that you're going around the charter. We hope that you'll follow the recommendation and go with the position profile that I believe you have in your packet. That was we took a vote on that, and that was unanimous. We believe that the position paper that we looked at was a result of work from a board of selectmen in Harwich. Julie and Linda didn't quite remember being a part of it, but it's something that Mr. Lawton has provided us, and he's been very helpful. So we thought it was a good document. We thought it was relevant. And again, it's a recommendation. Everything we do, Mr. Chairman, is a recommendation, purely a recommendation. So we also are going to recommend that you move forward with adopting that, and also accept the recommendation of the ad that I'm not sure you have. If you don't, we will make sure that you get it before any action is taken to move forward. Clearly, the charter calls for it to be advertised in the proper way, and it has been suggested, and we agreed, that the MMA Beacon, the Cape Cod Times, and the Boston Globe be the periodicals that we use, and that would be advertised for a 2-week period as soon as we could get those out. And that essentially is where we're at with our recommendations to the board. As far as resumes go, they would have to be returned electronically. We would also want references included in those resumes, and they would go to a secure email to the town clerk's office, and that would be controlled by Anita. That's where we're at. So those are our recommendations, and we'll just wait for the Board of Selectmen to tell us to stop or keep going.
Okay, thank you, Norm. I would like to deal first with the position profile. I put this together some months ago based on various sources. We considered it as a board then. I got some input, and I'm suggesting that we have a second look. If you agree, we could adopt the profile, and I think that'd be the first step. And then outside the search committee, we can use that then to fine tune the goals and objectives. But I think the first step on this process is, do we agree with the position profile? I'll look for comments on that from the board.
Larry, this is Steve Ford. I would move that we go forward with the position profile. Excuse me.
Is there a second?
You want to second?
I'll second it for discussion. Don.
Okay. The moved and seconded. Don, I'll turn the mic over to you then.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to underscore, because I haven't moved an inch since last summer when you were talking about this. So personally, what we really need is a leader, is somebody who has high ethical standards, who we can get the truth from, so we can act based on facts. And that's paramount to this, but you can't quantify that in this document. Secondly, underlying everything is the relationship that the administrator enjoys with the Board of Selectmen, and we really need somebody who's going to be a partner who understands that relationship, and that's more important than anything that's in the profile. That's where the wheels fell off the cart in a lot of ways, contracts and other things. Everybody has a role, and everybody has to understand what that role is. So I'm agreeing to vote for the profile, but the understanding is the charter is paramount, and the relationship that we have is based on the actual person and us, and not so much the document, because we have a contract. We can always modify this as we go along. when we enter into a contract for a TA.
Larry, if I could, Steve Ford. The reason I moved it is because I think it provides a great deal of latitude in the various descriptions of the types of things that we need from a town administrator. And I even believe, in answer to Dawn, that it addresses, perhaps in a general way, but it leaves open the desire that, Dawn just expressed, which I think we all agree with. And so I think the description, the profile that you've given, and I said this to you earlier when I sent you an email earlier today or yesterday, allows us to really look at the person from every angle.
Which is why I'm going to vote for it.
Okay. And other Michael comment?
Yeah, Larry, I think we're doing this a little backwards. We're voting on a profile that if you read the committee charge, the screening committee charge that you put together and we all discussed at several meetings, the search committee was to work with the search firm that we all voted through public participation to hire. Now we're meeting, because of the circumstances, we're meeting just us with the chair of the search committee with no public involvement, and we haven't yet voted as a board not to have a search committee. So your charge calls for the search firm to put together the profile. So are we assuming that we're not going to have a search firm now? And if we are, is it appropriate for this board to be having this conversation on a night where residents can't speak, can't be involved, and we're going back on the whole transparency and public involvement thing that we said we were going to do in every meeting that we discussed this in, and I have a list of those meetings, but I won't bore you with it. There was about 6 of them. So shouldn't we be changing directions before we vote on a profile? And I will say, shockingly, I agree with Don, and I definitely agree with Stephen that the profile, there's plenty of latitude in the profile. So I'm not against the profile, but I really feel like we're going backwards. And I don't see how this is transparent and open to the public in any way, shape, or form, since they can't call in, they can't be involved. And everything all of us have said from the beginning was that we were going to keep it transparent and open to the public.
You could do it in either order, profile. The reason I started with the profile first is we talked about this before, but whether we decide to move ahead and use this, ask us, okay, the search committee's recommendation to advertise, or whether we decide that we don't like that recommendation, we still need the profile because that drives what we want in the advertisement. Or at least it gives footing that we all agree to. You could take it in either order, I guess, but you have to, I think you have to do both. You have to have and we had discussed this before, just reinforcing what we've done before. It's a different discussion than transparency per se.
If I may, Larry, I agree. Like I said, I'm not hung up on the profile, but in criteria in the screening committee shall include meet with a town recruitment consultant to review position profile. So there's a lot of steps, is what I'm getting at, that we said we were going to do when we said unanimously that we were going to hire a search firm. We haven't taken that up yet, but we're talking about approving an ad that we haven't seen yet. We're reviewing an ad. Sorry, Norman, or Chief. We're reviewing an ad that we haven't seen yet. We're talking about a position profile that was supposed to be from a search firm that we all agreed we were going to hire. So I'm a little confused with the process, and I'm more confused with the fact that we're doing this on a night that a decision was made not to let the public watch, not to let the public call in.
I'd like to comment, if I could, from as the chair of the committee, on the 2 meetings that we did have remotely. And Mike, I get what you're saying, but this thing called global pandemic, COVID-19, that is really kind of thrown a wrench in the monkey works for all of this. It's made life difficult all the way around. So I respect what you're saying. We do start our meeting. We try and hold for a few minutes. Scott sets it up for folks to call in. It's not ideal. It's far less than ideal. But we tried to be transparent with this. I think the committee that the Board of Selectmen put into place to do this is very representative of the community. There's no intent at all here to do anything behind what we think is best for the community. That's why we're here. That's why you're selectmen. So the concern is that the critical situation that we're all facing is that we need permanent leadership in a town administrator, and we all agree. I have to go back up a little bit and commend Channel 18 that they put our meeting out. As soon as I get home, I get a call on someone will call me or text me with comments about the meeting. So hopefully the folks are seeing what we're doing, and we feel very strongly that we can recommend a process that is fair, that meets the requirements. It may be the bare minimum requirements of the charter, but we just feel strongly, all five of us feel very strongly that this process needs to move along quickly. I don't know how much stronger I can make this. This is about public safety, in my opinion, right now, almost trumps process, but we're doing the best we can to be open with this. So I appreciate you wanting to make this open. I wish we had a room full of people that could come and listen and have input. And the way we're doing selectmen's meetings is less than what we all want, but that's what we're faced with. So we've provided you with an honest, upfront, public safety, thinking of the citizens first, and then trying to adapt proper process to it. And this is not easy, but we feel very strongly. So I understand what you're saying, Mike, but I disagree with you. I ask that the board move forward with this process.
Let me just comment that.
Larry, before I end up on Sandyland because of a misconception or whatever, just so the chief knows, Chief, I was not speaking of your meetings. I was not speaking of the search committee meetings. I'm speaking of this meeting, the Board of Selectmen meeting. I'm not stating at all, anywhere, at any time that you guys have done anything transparent or for lack of transparency or anything else. I'm speaking, and my comments were directed at the Board of Selectmen, not the search committee. Not you, not the search committee, just so that there's absolutely no confusion with any selectmen. I'm speaking to Larry and the board about what we're doing right now and about what we're changing right now based on what we've already voted. So I appreciate what your recommendations are, but we haven't even, in my mind, we haven't even gotten there because we haven't voted to change the process yet. And I do appreciate you as the chief recommending that we speed this process up and that we need a leader. I'll get into my comments after, but my comments were not directed at the search committee.
I understand that. The other point that I see is on the agenda was the recommendation that we gave last week, as I represented the committee, was not to spend the money. And I'm not exactly sure, and I should know, but I don't. I used the $12,000. It may be less than that. We just felt it would be the responsible thing would be for us to take on more responsibility to move this forward, and even the board take on more responsibility to move this forward without spending any tax dollars on a search committee, on a consultant. That's all. That's not ideal either. It's not, but it's prudent.
Larry?
I think let me just say a word here, if I may. Where we are now is we can come back to the profile, but where we are now, in my mind, is that the search committee has made a recommendation that we alter our charge and go through the charge process of advertising without the use of a search firm. We should address that. If anyone cares to make a motion to do that,
Larry, that's what I was just going to say. Do you want me to make a motion relative to that?
Well, it's up to you, but it's the board vote on whether we want to move ahead. That's on the agenda.
Before you could do that, I'd have to withdraw my second, and Steve would have to withdraw his motion to resequence.
Right, okay. Let's finish. Are there any comments or any reason we shouldn't approve? We have a motion and a second on the position profile. Let me take a roll call on where you are on that. Steve?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Michael?
I'm going to abstain because of the doing this in reverse order. We have not changed the method of what we're doing yet. So we're voting on something that contradicts what we've already voted. So I'm actually just a no vote.
Right, okay. And I'm a yes, so it's 4-1. And so we'll move on whether we want to take the search committee's recommendation or not.
I'll move that the selectmen accept the recommendation of the selection of the selection committee not to hire a selection consultant and move forward with the shortened process as recommended.
Is there a second?
Don, aye.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and now I entertain further discussion.
If I may, Larry?
Yeah, weigh in again.
Yeah, I'll start. First and foremost, so I got into it a little bit a minute ago, but I wanted to thank the chief as the chairman of the search committee for sending the draft minutes to the board so that we could read it and understand what your discussion was. Thank you. It was alluded to, or not alluded to, on social media that I attacked your character. And it was also said by a selectman that to a department head that I basically called you a liar. Now, as sure as you're sitting here and I'm sitting here, if I called you a liar or questioned your integrity, there would have been fireworks. And I appreciate the conversation that we had after that ridiculous post was put up on the dictator's page. But I really appreciate the conversation we had and the laughs that we had. And I also appreciate some of the people from Harwich Old Timers commenting and calling me to say that they're not really sure where Sandy's getting this information because it's not what I'm saying. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate our conversation, Norm. I'm going to reiterate what I just said. We are doing a terrible disservice to the taxpayers of the town of Harwich, both resident and non-resident. This is the single most important decision the Board of Selectmen will make. Fast-tracking this for any reason is an absolute mistake. We voted unanimously prior to the pandemic to have a search firm, and we did that for a reason. Other towns have hired search firms, and they are not swaying from their path on looking for and at least advertising and going about the process correctly, like most towns do. And I can give you a list if you want them, but I won't bore you with that because I'm pretty sure that the vote's all set. But we are not doing the taxpayers any service at all by rushing any process that is the most important decision that the Board of Selectmen will make. We are looking for the administrator for the town for the Board of Selectmen. Now, I know some have said we already have that person. We may have that person. But we should exhaust all options and read all applications and see everything and go about the most thorough process we can to make sure we have that person. And I am not right now saying by any means that Joe is not the person, and I will say his name. He may be, but we owe it to the taxpayers to put as much thought and effort into this as we can. And if you think back to the conversations that the board has had and the reasons why we wanted a search firm, to simply say we're in the middle of a pandemic and we need leadership is wrong. We have leadership. We have the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. We have 4 other members of the Board of Selectmen, and we have an acting town administrator. We have a health agent. We have the fire chief, deputy fire chief, police chief, deputy police chief, and a whole bunch of incredible staff. To rush this, in my opinion, is an absolute mistake.
Michael, any other comments?
None.
Any other board member?
I do. It's Don.
Don?
Couldn't disagree with Michael more. No action is an action. We are 5 months in or thereabouts into the acting tenure of the assistant town administrator. We are allowed to go up to 6 months, after which there's a real question about whether he can act anymore. So we get another person, and if you want more volatility, that's a real good way of getting it. And as far as I'm concerned, without saying how I would vote ultimately on this, we will never know as much about a candidate for this position as we know about at least one person who might be a candidate for this position, the person who's acting, because we have had 5 months and we have had problems. And yes, the COVID pandemic absolutely has something to do with this, because when we were talking about that search firm, we were talking about a timeline where right about now we'd be interviewing candidates. We haven't even begun that process. So stepping back is an action. If that's what I don't see how that helps the town's taxpayers, who would not be voting on this themselves. They vote on us to have a committee, to have a process. We're still in control of that process. So again, I couldn't disagree more.
Anyone else care to comment? Ed?
Yeah, well, I take to heart, I think, what the comments that Michael has made. This is the single most important thing that we decide on as selectmen through our years serving, and to rush it, I think is a mistake. The charter requires us to put out an advertisement. To put out an advertisement in the middle of a statewide pandemic, a worldwide pandemic. I'm not sure exactly what sort of applicant pool you're going to get. We do, Michael's right, we do have leadership here. I don't have the same qualms about whether or not we can continue our existing acting town administrator past the 6 months level that Don does. But I think to hire somebody in the midst of an emergency that is going to help us in starting hopefully next fall, when we were past some of this, develop the goals and program for us to move into the next 10 years of development of our community is probably rushing it. And you're probably not going to wind up with an applicant pool that has any depth at this point. And I would think that if we can look at this at some point at a slower rate, so we make sure that we do get a good look at what we want for normal times. I mean, in the past we had Lee Culver as our emergency manager, and he did a great job whenever there was an emergency in town. And I thought he was spectacular at it, but I'm not sure he would have ever been the person I would have voted to be as a town administrator. for the long term. And I'm just afraid that we need to, I think, wait until at such time as we can be less concerned and overwhelmed by the current emergency and be able to look for the long term of the town.
Hey, Larry. Okay, Ed. Steve?
Well, that begs a question, because that assumes that we have the authority and ability as the selectmen, as a select board, to continue having an acting town administrator. Do we have that authority?
Not this one. You can only make two appointments.
Well, I think that presents a very unique problem for us. I mean, we're in a situation where we need some truly defined leadership here, someone who we feel can guide us through this next, I don't know what you want to call it, a year or 6 months, or whatever it might be. But if we have to switch who is our acting town administrator in another 6 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever it is, that would be a much larger mistake for the selectmen to make in the middle of this huge issue that we have. I don't disagree with Ed or Michael that we should have a process to select a town administrator that reflects what we believe is the best town administrator and what the townspeople believe. But we've come to a sort of a crisis point here where the individuals who we chose to serve on our selection committee, who we all believe are not only very well qualified, but also reflect the town, have come to us and said, you know, this is a situation where we really need to move quickly. Now, I don't know whether we do something along the lines of limiting the term of the individual in order to address the concerns that are being expressed tonight. Saying that, you know, whoever it is we hire as a result of this search, which will be a truncated search, would only be for a year and then would be reviewed, as any individual who we employ would be reviewed. But, you know, I do think we do need to take some kind of action here because, you know, if Dawn's correct and we have to find some other town administrator as some other individual as the acting administrator, I think that's a huge mistake.
Larry?
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, yes, Michael.
Thank you. Just as Stephen's point, you know, we're having this conversation about limiting terms. You know, that's assuming that we're going to pick somebody. And you know, Don is not the author of the charter. And you know, he often talks about the charter like it's everything, but it depends on what he wants at that point. I think at this point, Larry, we should talk to legal about this. And to Ed's point, we are in a pandemic. We're making all kinds of emergency decisions at this point. But are we really going to say to the taxpayers, we got to rush and hire a town administrator right now? And to what Don wants, just put the guy that's in there and let's skip the whole process. Why would we want to rush this? Why don't we go to legal and find out if we have an option rather than just what Sandy and Don want and move forward with whether or not there's a grace period. Now, let's not blame the search committee here either, because the search committee, we've only lost 4 weeks. Don talks about how many months we're into this. So if the Board of Selectmen dragged their feet through the first 3 months of this, and now we're up against the edge, that's on us. It's not on the search committee, and there's no reason at this point the search committee should be rushed. And this sounds like it's going to be a rushed thing, and that's not. You know, no decision's a decision. This isn't no decision. This is taking an educated approach to making sure that we interview anyone that's out there, and the best person for the job will get the job. But I imagine since the emergency status, Larry, I think we should get some advice on how we can proceed and buy a little more time to make sure that we do this right for the taxpayers.
Larry, this is Don.
Don?
Yeah, I'll thank my colleague to keep his mouth shut about what I think unless I'm saying what I think. because at least three comments were made about what I am going to do and what I've stated that I have not stated. So again, I can speak for myself. So the question I have for the two who appear to be against doing this is exactly what date is this pandemic over so that we're going to be cleared to get all sorts of candidates to come in? Is there some plan for a time?
I'll answer that.
Michael, and then go ahead.
I'll answer that. No, Don, there's no date. But again, the decision to just put somebody in a seat and not go through a process that's fair for the taxpayers, all the taxpayers, is wrong. So no, you're right. There is no date.
Okay. The second comment I was going to make is everyone through the process that we used, every selectman had their own person submitted to be on that committee. So that committee is an amalgamation of each of the selectmen that are sitting here tonight. It would be hard to distance yourself, but at least one of the people that are giving you the recommendation is your own appointment.
And if I can answer that, Don, I agree with you 100%. We all picked a person, and I have a great deal of respect for every person that was picked for the search committee. But the search committee, if you actually read the committee charge and were involved in the 6 times we spoke about it, the search committee must work with a search firm. Midstream done. And all you have to do is read what the charge is.
Let me comment. We've gone a funny direction. This is not a discussion about the search committee or versus what they're doing. What the recommendation is, it's not shutting down the process. The process originally was we ask a search firm to bring candidates to us, and then the search committee interviews them. The part that they've asked to eliminate from that is the service, the consulting firm, to bring candidates to us. The intent is still to advertise for the position in MMA, the Beacon, which is what the search firms normally do anyway, in the newspapers. We'll miss some networking opportunity, but we're not shortcutting getting as many candidates as we can from that process. You know, I've been saying, to Michael, your point, which I totally agree, I've been saying from day one that we're not in a panic. We have a strong acting town administrator. We have a great town staff. And so we're proceeding quite well. But I had no intent that this was going to last. Now we don't know when the flu pandemic is going to be over. We could be carrying this on until next fall. Now, I'm not sure we want to do that. I think we ought to move on with life. We have a lot of things going on in addition to the things that we pointed out last week. We spend a lot of time worried about COVID, so-called COVID-19. We have other issues to come up with. We have to look at the warrant articles came forward. We have to relook at the budget. I don't want to slow that process down while we're looking at these other activities. It's been a good discussion. I agree. There's some strong points. It's not an easy decision.
Sorry, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Thank you for that. And just back to the search firm versus no search firm, because I imagine that's what the vote should be. And I agree with you. And I really agree with you about doing other business. Last week we got in the presentation, we got who was in charge of COVID-19 for the town of Harwich, which was the health director, with Joe as the acting town administrator as support. You know, when people can go back into town hall and back into their buildings and actually conduct business the way we used to is an unknown. We still have an incredible staff. Most of them are working from home. We still have a acting, I guess, assistant town administrator and Bob Lawton that we're paying money to. There's other decisions that can be made. As far as the $12,000 goes, if that's the number, just if we're going to refocus on the search firm, I've heard a few times now from a few different people and also read on social media that we shouldn't be spending $12,000 on a search firm. Now, you know, last week I got an email based on the one set of minutes that we paid somebody to do for the Board of Selectmen, one set of minutes, and I don't believe they were actually even ever completed. Cost the town $328. In the month of March, we had $4,700 in overtime at the dump in the month of March. We spend money in ways that we probably should never spend money, and there's a lot that we're not paying attention to. So we're really going to make the statement to the taxpayers now that $12,000 is too much to put a search out to make sure that we get the right candidate to run this town for the next however many years. And I'll say it again before I'm misquoted. Maybe we have the guy. Maybe he's already in here. But the process, and everybody knows I'm all about process. And everybody also knows I fight most spending, and I question the budgets more than anybody. In this case, $12,000 could be money well spent to the taxpayers.
Michael, for me personally, the money's not the driving factor on this. I would not say that's the reason for moving ahead. The dollar value actually is $10,000 because that's what the procurement led us to. We can't go above $10,000 the way we went through with advertise for the search firm. But that's around, that doesn't influence my discussion on this. My discussion is there a way that, and should we move ahead? To say that another way, is there anything gained by not getting advertising and getting applicants in? Is that applicant pool going to improve July, September? It's a crapshoot. In the meantime, we could be hurting ourselves and getting town's business done. And that's where I am. Anyone else?
Larry, can I just make another comment, please? The committee, we take this very seriously. And the flip side of this, if there is a glass half full on this, that this Board of Selectmen, yes, you're going to hire an administrator that you will have for hopefully many years to come. But even in fairness to the interim administrator, you're having a job interview like none other. You said yourselves, as the assistant administrator, how we performed through a tornado, which I've repeatedly said, never thought I'd have to live through that. And then what's the next thing down the road? Is a global pandemic. You've had the opportunity to see this guy, present a budget and go through these emergencies that none of us were ever prepared for. So that's why the committee just feels that if we can just, in a fair way, in my previous comments may not sound fair, but they're realistic. We just feel the community deserves firm leadership. And yes, you've got great staff and all, but firm leadership in the administrator. And you've had a chance to see how this guy performs. But we also say that there is a charter, there is a process. We're asking that process move forward in the best interest of the citizens. And I understand that's a rub when it comes down to some transparency, but I don't know how much more we can talk about a global pandemic and how it's affecting our citizens, because it's dramatic. It's affecting all of us. So our recommendation, all five of us, were to not spend the money and to move quickly and to provide the Board of Selectmen the documentation to go ahead and advertise this and get back to you with maybe 10 resumes, maybe 100, maybe none. But certainly the interim has been through a job interview like none of the people you're going to see come forward. And we feel very strongly about that. So those are our recommendations. We serve at the pleasure of the board, and we need direction.
At this point, we have a motion and a second to follow the search committee's recommendations on these. I'll take a roll call vote. Michael, I'll start with you.
No.
Don?
Aye.
Ed?
No.
Steve?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So it carries. One comment that have to get off my chest because it irritates me a little bit. Michael, you made a comment coming in that someone indirectly called you a liar. And you and I disagree about a lot of things, but I've never had any question that if you disagree with me, you tell me directly to my face. So I know what's happening.
Thank you.
And I can say that for other selectmen. I have no interest in hearing, and I don't think it happens if anyone talking behind anyone else's back. So I want to make that clear. If we can argue, we debated tonight, and we will continue to argue. That's our job. If we didn't argue, hell, I wouldn't need you guys. I could just dictate myself.
Thank you, Larry. I appreciate that. And I know exactly that. I know what comes out of your mouth is true, and I know you're not talking sideways. And the one that called me a liar knows who called me a liar.
Okay, can we get Joe back in? We'll go to the town administrator report. And Norm, will you have a work with, I guess, Bob on what the advertisement looks like and bring that back to us?
I'll make sure you have all the documentation, the profile. Let the board take another look at that, make sure it's accurate, and the advertisement and where we would recommend that it be advertised to make sure it's done correctly.
Thank you, Norm.
That'll be done.
Hey, Larry, I think.
Who's talking?
Larry. Yes. Larry and Steve.
Yes.
I think that Joe intended not to get back on. He said he had no administrative report.
Okay, I'll go then to selectmen's reports. Don, I'll start with you.
Yeah, this is kind of like ancient history, but East Harwich, the sewer construction, there were two things, one of which we agreed to, I can't remember whether it was 2 meetings ago or what, but for an extended construction time. And I noticed that right after that, a couple of days, they wound up actually truncating the time. I suppose that's up to them. But the second comment I have wouldn't be. I'd have been, and you know, because you live out in that in East Harwich, as well as where I live, that the signs I've said in the past are not all that illustrative. You wind up going where you think you can, and there's nothing but a dead end. Or I'd asked for something more specific, like no outlet to Route 6 or even a detour. And I know the last 2 out of the last 5 days in East Harwich, I made a left turn 39 and 137 where there wasn't a detour sign, there weren't any cones. You could go as far as the plaza for the subway, but you couldn't go any further than that. So you couldn't even get to Austin Road to turn around, so you had to make a U-turn. I just want some clarity. They promised they would put some signs up that were a little more explicit, and that hasn't happened.
Let me follow up with Joe and Griffin on that, because they're their main interaction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Michael?
Larry, to the wastewater point, a long time ago, I believe it was right at the transition of the past town administrator, and it started with the change order for the fire station 2. At that meeting, we all agreed that we would get and see change orders relative to the East Harwich construction project. And it's my understanding that there's a large amount of change orders looming that the contractors have not been paid for. So if we could get a status on change orders from the town administrator and kind of where we're at with the budget out there, I think it's important, given the mistakes that we've made in the past on this, to show those change orders and for the board to approve them, and also to recalculate what the budget is out there.
Yeah. I agree. I know some of the change orders Joe's been holding up because he's disagreed with them, and he and Griffin have been working on it. But I'll get that message back.
Thank you.
Ed? Ed, can you still hear me?
Oh yeah, no, I don't have anything particularly to report. I'm glad to hear that we'll be able to next week reopen the construction and yard waste areas and transfer stations, and folks I've run into have driving around with trucks full of stuff because they don't know where to take it right now. It'll be nice to be able to have them empty out their trucks.
I certainly agree. Steve?
Just a comment. I want to be sure that as we go through what is a shortened process here, looking at the selection of the town administrator, that we take into consideration the concerns both voiced by Michael and by Ed. And I am sure that Norm Clark, in his description of how they wanted to proceed, no intention of ignoring any candidate that we get as a result of our search, as a result of our advertisement. But I want to assure, my fellow selectmen here that I certainly want to see every resume. And if we get some great candidates, I want to make sure that we consider those great candidates. So that's, not that I don't think Joe has done a terrific job. I do. But it's way premature to be, making any statement that it's an automatic situation here. I respect fully their desire to have a full consultant-run search, but I do think we're in a situation where we need to do it this way. But we can still do it in an effective fashion.
I fully agree with that. My last comment is that I do intend to bring up shortly a relook at the town warrant articles. I made a stab at my thoughts and checking them out, put it on the agenda because I think again, I haven't talked to you. My personal opinion is, since we haven't talked about it, is that we should be looking at a short town meeting and pull off warrant articles that we think will drag the meeting on with large debates. We can bring those back if we have to in the fall. We're certainly going to have to relook at the budgets because the revenues are not going to be what we expect them to be. And so we need to bring both those back. But I think we first tend to put it on the agenda shortly. The warrant article, we can look at those. Okay. Anything else?
Larry?
Yes, Ed?
Yeah, well, follow up on what Steve just said. One of the things he said earlier is, which I quite honestly think is a good idea, is to look at because of the time and the conditions in which we'll be doing this hiring search, is to be doing a year's contract and then reviewing at the end of it, and essentially, my druthers would be to do the year's contract and then put out the advertisement and search and do the search then, when presumably, who knows, maybe not, things will have at least calmed down, if not gotten to a level of normalcy where we can have a process that not only involves us and the 5 members of the search committee, but allows some participation by the rest of the folks in town.
Okay. Thank you, Ed. That's all I have. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There's motion and second. I'll take a roll call. Don?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Thank you very much. Enjoy the
night, everyone.
Good night.
Take care.
This conference has no longer been